Hello, everyone. This is Al Fadi, and I want to welcome you back to a continuation of our discussions about the Quranic manuscripts, early Quranic manuscripts, and how they will debunk even the early Islamic history. Today, we're going to talk about a very interesting find known as the Birmingham Folios. And if you've been following the news, for instance, on BBC or other outlets, you would have noticed how our Muslim friends were jumping up and down the fact that they finally found something that can be dated all the way to the Prophet's time. Or is it? That's why we're going to talk about it and show you that even this find, the Birmingham Folios, will prove that most likely it's not even Islamic. In fact, I would call it the source text for the Quran. With me here to unpack all of this is Dr. J. Dr. J, I remember, when this came about. In fact, it was during that time when I even interviewed you on my podcast to talk about it. And you did write, a few pages to respond to it. And so did Gabrielle Said Reynolds as well, among others.
2015, I think it was July to 22nd, all over the papers. BBC put it front and center. This fellow, David Thomas, who you know personally, Dr. David Thomas out of Birmingham, was crowing about it. This is the greatest find in the last 1400 years. We now have the original Quran. This is the Quran that Muhammad read. This is the Quran that Muhammad wrote. This is the Quran that Muhammad received. And we can prove it because we have now carbon dating. And if you carbon date something, it is so accurate that we can therefore use it. And of course, this was, you can see, let me just put up the slide here and you can see a picture of Dr. David Thomas. If you just go ahead to the slide that we're looking at now, when you look at the slide, you will see he is the curator for the Birmingham Library. You can see why he was excited about it, because for Western scholars, they want to placate Muslims whenever they can. They want to give Muslims what they're looking for. The Muslims are ones that are claiming that Muhammad received this between 610 and 622. What better way to placate Muslims than to find actually the manuscript of the Quran from that time period? It was found by accident. What's the name of the lady that found it, actually? She's the one that wrote the book on the palimpsest. But anyway, I can't remember her name off the top of my head.
Are you talking Abla Fideli?
Fideli,
yeah.
She was in
Alba Fideli, I'm sorry.
She was there in the Birmingham Library. She was looking at these manuscripts of the Quran, and these two folios fell out. They weren't part of the manuscript that she was looking at, and she noticed that they didn't have any diacritical marks. They didn't have any vowelization, which means that they're from the 7th or 8th century. So she sent them down, these two folios, just 2 pages, she sent them down to Oxford University to be tested by carbon dating. We like to use carbon dating, but the problem with carbon dating is this. Well, let me ask you, why would you not trust carbon dating?
Well, it's not really accurate in the sense to give you a precise date. It will give you a range.
Yeah, and I don't have a problem with that. But the other problem is carbon dating only dates when the animal died.
The animal, it doesn't also, you cannot use it to, for instance, date the ink itself.
No, you can't date ink because ink comes from many different pigments that are amalgamated together from many different places, many different time periods. They could be hundreds of years old mixed with those that are very recent because you change the pigments depending on what color you want. Therefore, it's impossible to date ink. You have to date only the skin. And these are animal skins, these are goat skins. And when the animal dies, then the carbon starts to exude, and you can date the amount of deterioration over hundreds of years. So this one was dated from 568 to 645. Muhammad was born in 570, according to the standard Islamic narrative.
Exactly.
And died in 632. So this covers his lifetime, 2 years before he was born, and about 7 years after he died. Well, more than that, about 8 years after he died, or whatever, about roughly 10 years after he died. So if that is the case, they do have a case, and you can see why.
To celebrate.
Yeah. To celebrate. But I want to look to the next slide here, because when you look at the next slide, you need to ask, there's a picture of the foliage. Look at, this is not a whole manuscript. This is not a whole Quran. They were all talking about this is the Quran that Muhammad made. No, it's 2 pages. There it is. That's the entire Birmingham folio. You can see it there in the picture. It's front to back, 2 folios, 2 pages, and it's 33 verses. From where? Well, it's from the Quran, you're correct, in chapter 18 to chapter 20. But chapter 18 to chapter 20 have 343 verses. This is only 33, so this is just a 1/10 of even those 3 chapters.
Correct.
The Quran itself have over 6,236 verses. 33 verses do not make a Quran. It's just a small facsimile of the Quran. That's the first problem. So stop calling this a Quran. Now the dates, I'm willing to go with these dates actually. I think these are good. That's fine. It's a huge amount of dates because that's the problem with carbon dating. It's very inexact. 568, 645, let's go with that. What you need to do next is look at the content. Look at what's inside these folios. And there are 3 stories that are inside these folios. The first story is the story of the 7 sleepers of Ephesus. This is the 7 sleepers with the dog. They go into this cave. They're running away. They go to sleep. And when they wake up 300 years later. And they find out that they have, or however many, maybe it's more than 300, but it's a lot of hundreds of years later.
It is around 300 for sure.
And you can go to Ephesus. I've been there. My sister lives very close to it. I've been to where the cave is. There is a restaurant right there that we went and ate at called the 7 Sleepers of Ephesus. It's a very long tradition. And that cave was there long before Islam.
A Christian tradition, basically.
It's a Christian tradition, and it comes from the Syrian bishop Jacob of Sadok, who talks about it. And our good friend talked about it this morning when we were on the phone call with them. This is the same Jacob of Sadok. This story comes from his writings. He was writing this in the 6th century, 512. So this is about 100 years before the Quran even came into existence, because the Quran only came into existence from 610 to 632. So roughly, not quite 100 years earlier, this story, it would have been all around the world at that time, that part of the world. It would have been a well-known story. That makes sense that it's in the Quran, and because it's written in Arabic. Now, when you go to the other second story, that is the reference to, that's chapter 19, verse 91 to 98, comes straight out of the Proto-Evangelium of James, which was first written in 145. So this is a 2nd century document.
Right.
Then it reappears in the pseudo-gospel of Matthew in 600 AD, which makes sense because that was written right in the same area in the north where the Quran was put together to begin with. So it stands to reason that they've just lifted this out of the pseudo-gospel of Matthew, taken from the Proto-Evangelium of James in the 2nd century.
This is a body of what we call the infancy gospel.
The infancy gospel.
Yeah.
Straight out of that material. Yeah. And then it's put into this book called the Quran. After 600? No, I would say this is probably in the 8th century that was added into it. And then, of course, chapter 20, verse 1 to 40 is the story of Moses, which comes straight out of the Bible. The story of Moses is in Surah 1, Surah 20, ayah 1 to 40, is nothing more than lifting out of the Bible itself, which comes from 1400 BC. Can you see what's going on here? What have I just told you? And what have I just said to you?
It's a theme. Either it's a Christian heritage or something about Jesus or something about Moses.
Which stands to reason. If you're going to create a book for a man who now is your prophet and you want to give him a book, you're going to have to go and find and look to see where the material is. You can't write it yourself. So you go to what already exists in Arabic. You go to what already exists. These were all in Arabic. By the 7th century and the 8th century, they were all written in Arabic. You lift them out and you slap them into it. You don't put them all in sequence. You don't even put them together. You put them in whichever way you find them. And that's why they're in chapter 18, chapter 19, and chapter 20. They only make up 10% of those chapters. To say that this is the Quran and to say that this is for Muhammad, not at all. These are all predate Islam. They all predate Muhammad. And they all predate the Quran. If indeed the Muslims claim the Quran was put together between 610 and 632, do you notice these are all dates that are earlier than that?
That's right. And by the way, this is part of even other folios that Yassine Dutton studied. I think in total are 9 folios.
Pat Andrews right now, Dr. Pat Andrews, who is our researcher, you use him, I use him, he is actually going and finding that lots of this material. He is finding a whole litany of the Quran that comes from St. Ephraim from the 4th century, written originally in Aramaic, then transposed into Arabic. And that's where you get the problems. Once you take it from Aramaic into Arabic, you start bastardizing it. You start destroying it, and you eradicate any of the notions of what the original Aramaic is. In these cases, they didn't bastardize the text so much because there was no reason to. What they wanted to bastardize was any reference to Jesus as God. That they took out and made it nothing more than the prophet or the Nabi of Allah, the prophet of God, over and over again. They take Jesus' name out and they put him as the praised one.
Amen. Amen. What are we going to talk about next?
Well, then we're going to get into the most infamous material, and that is the Qira'ats. Wait till we get to the Qira'ats. This is what destroyed the preservation of the Quran by one woman who is only 5'2".
We are going to wait with anticipation, of course, to hear more about this. Of course, myself and Jay have covered this multiple times, and we will continue to do this. But I say this for those of you who are watching right now, probably wondering about what he meant by that. And indeed, a powerful woman of God. Thank you, brother. Thank you, everyone. This is Al-Fadi, over and out. God bless. Thank you for watching this video. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel, Sira International, and click on the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we publish a new video or go live. I would also like to appeal to you to consider becoming a Patreon patron by clicking the link right below. By doing so, you can give towards the production of these videos. There are also other options for you where you can give to our channel. I thank you from the bottom of my heart.